Oftentimes I read Kehinde's work reference master paintings. I think that's actually wrong. I think Kehinde Wiley has mastered master paintings. And I think he has used those tropes within master paintings to really disrupt and bring socially an impact of the Black male body.
I mean, I'm biased, but I think it's some of his strongest work. I've just never seen people respond so raw.
Each one of these losses is handled and dealt with by families and by loved ones who hopefully will carry the individual significance of those people on. But the job of my work is to be able to speak that loudly.
Break down, look. How much longer till we? How much longer?
The dry riverbeds call for rain. Let the dying soul breathe life again. Let these broken dreams rise awake. And these once living stones reanimate. Oh, no more wasted minutes, no more wasted days, no more wasted hours, no more wasted no more wasted minutes, no more wasted days, no more wasted hours, no more wasted years. No more, yeah. No more, yeah. No more, yeah. Listen, it's time for Jubilee. Hear it speak. Every whispered prayer come to be. Contract hearts revived again, yeah. We say no more wasted minutes, no more wasted days, no more wasted hours, no more wasted years. No more wasted minutes, no more wasted days, no more wasted hours, no more wasted years. When the splendor falls, all things must come to light. Come to light, come to light. And when the splendor falls, all things must come. wasted hours. No more wasted years. No more wasted minutes. No more wasted days. No more wasted hours. No more wasted years.
Yes, what's up? Y'all give it up for my sister Nikki, my boy B-Joy, my boy So Chill, and my man himself, James Pack. My name's Royce Levitt. We are Common People, and we're bringing you the sounds from the lyrical underground, the spiritual underground, dedicated to them that always had a sound, but it never got around. So we gotta put it down. Tell me, can we kick it now? Say, I'm on my way.
I'm on my way.
Say, I'm on my way.
I'm on my way.
Say, I'm on my way.
I'm on my way.
So chill on his way. Here we go, here we go. Say, I'm on my way, yeah.
I'm on my way.
Yeah, I'm on my way, yeah.
I'm on my way.
Yeah, I'm on my way.
I'm on my way.
My boy James on his way, on his way, on his way.
My Lord, my Lord. So many empty tears falling on the floor. No more, no more. I might be limping, but I'm kicking down the door. I'll be on my way. I'll be on my way. I'll be on my way. I'll be on my way.
I put the message in the bottle, few words I couldn't swallow. Funny how the alphabet yesterday I touched my tomorrow. Damn, fam, can hurt you more than the curse. Black folk ain't got a whoop with rims on a hurt. I feel intense like Indy Gas and Willie Lynch. I wonder, can I touch the sky? I just am still in fast. Generational, inherently black. Educational, the impairing the tech, but I ain't tripping, just spitting written descriptions. Listen, I keep it real like I'm fishing. I gotta die like 10 wishes. With the rail on my back, I can't lose. You got 2 boys and a Batman pole. I'm blasting, I'm on my way, say, I'm on my way. I'm on my way, say, I'm on my way. I'm on my way, say, I'm on my way. I'm on my way, I'm on my way.
My Lord, my Lord. So many empty tears falling on the floor. No more, no more. Might be limping, but I'm kicking down the door. I'll be on my way. I'll be on my way. I'll be on my way. I'll be on my way.
Baby, I done did it again. I put my fist in the drink and pain to the pen. It needs to release. I hate to pretend, but I done seen too many people playing get hit. I make it to quit. I want you happy. I want you never stressing about your next meal, but focus on your next meal and on your next meal. I know you love me. I never thought that I just tweak from time to time. I always be ride or die. I know that real thing hard to find. So I'm so committed to the vibe now. Always thinking about right now. Always be in and out of thoughts. I truly need to type out. Getting better with tight now. We got wait for the sky down. I'll be on my way, on my way. It's the sorry for the hard times, but the good times always are waiting. It's not an excuse, it isn't proof. I'm just saying we live in abundance in our radius is effervescent. I love your essence, but baby, I'm on my way.
Yeah, I'm on my way.
I'm on my way.
He on her way.
I'm on my way.
James on his way, on the way, we on the way.
My Lord, my Lord. So many empty tears falling on the floor. No more, no more. Might be limping, but I'm kicking down the door. I'll be on my way. I'll be on my way.
I'll be on my way.
I'll be on my way.
I'll be on my way.
I'll be on my way.
On my way. On my
I'll be on my way.
Still on his way.
Royce on his way.
Said still on his way.
Royce on his way.
Common people on their way.
We on our way.
So we stay on the way, on the way,
On our way.
on the way. I don't know justice.
And I haven't met peace.
I mean, I was told that I met her. I was told that peace lives around here, but I think they must be confused. Confused with silence, perhaps. In fact, I asked silence, and she said,
Nah, young man, peace don't live around here. I don't even look like that queen. She sings and carries a big sword with a smile so clean. Her hair is natural and it rings like bells. And in heels, she's just a little taller than justice.
So I don't know justice.
And I haven't met peace.
And she said, justice? Just his arms are long and his embrace is strong, and you can hear every step he takes. No, not every step he asks for. Every step he takes. No, not every step that is given. Every step he takes. She said,
Go back. Go back and let them know that they got me wrong. I am silent. My cousins are dumb.
Hush.
Mute.
Quiet.
Settle. Shut up. Sit still. You know them.
I don't know, Justice.
And I haven't met peace.
I see the way the healer made. We'd rather have the disease instead. It's bleak, but it don't have to be this way. Our pride will be the death of us. All the bleeding, the grieving, the tears mean what? All of the thoughts and the prayers for naught. If we really want change, we must count the cost. Our pride will be the death of us. And Jesus, are you still showing mercy? Our homes and our schools are burning. Will you still hear our prayer? Our prayer. And Abba, has your patience grown shorter for your broken sons and daughters? Will you still hear our prayer? And Kehinde, have mercy, have mercy, have mercy on us. And have mercy, have mercy, have mercy on us. But if we turn as you prophesy, you will derail us from our demise. But if we fail to unveil our eyes, our pride will be the death of us.
Mother's lost her child. Father's breaking down.
children with no hope to be found. Our tears fall down like rain. Are you speaking to our pain? Feels like the stone won't let us out. Oh, when systems give no room to breathe, and justice is so hard to see. Oh Lord, help our unbelief. We need you now. All of our help, all of our healing, we call Jehovah Rapha. Come and heal.
Pushing through the crowd, you know where healing can be found. When it's just one touch of your ground. Yeah. When systems give no room to breathe, and justice is so hard to see. Oh Lord, help our unbelief. We need you now. Nuestra ayuda comes from la sanidad. Cantamos Jehovah Rapha. Come and heal. Nuestra ayuda comes from la sanidad. Cantamos Jehovah Rapha.
We know you have the power to come and heal our land like only you can come.
Eres nuestro sanador. Oh.
We mourn with the mothers whose heart is in pain. We stand with the fathers in their holy rage. Jehovah Rapha, come and heal.
We sing with the children whose hope is not found. Believing in you, all things turn around. Jehovah Rapha. Oh, we mourn with the mothers whose heart is in pain. We stand with the fathers in their holy faith. Jehovah Rapha. We sing, we sing, we sing.
Clap your hands. We're about 5 minutes away from getting started, but we certainly want to just welcome everyone and thank you for being here. We do have folks that are still trying to get in from the outside, and so I'm going to treat y'all like I do my black church. Somebody say amen. If there is an empty seat in between you, I need you to move towards the center. Towards the center. So our folks that are coming in don't have to step on your red bottoms, your Air Force Ones, your Jordans to get in the room. Is that all right? Just move towards the center of your row. So the empty seats are on the outside of the row, not in between you. Look at all these cooperating black church folks on a Saturday at the D. Young Museum. Somebody say amen. All right, let's do a roll call. How many folks we got in here from San Francisco? All right. Any Oakland people in the building? All right. Richmond in the house. All right. Hide the women and children. No. Vallejo in the building. Come on, Vallejo. All right. How about across the Golden Gate Bridge? Any folks from Marin in the building? Hey. All right. How about, let's go a little further. Did I say Berkeley? Any Berkeley people in the building? All right. Any other East Bay folks in the building? Elsa Brante and did I say Richmond? Woo, woo, woo. Y'all okay? Any Sacramento folks in the building? We didn't get no Sacramento commuters today. All right. Any cities that I missed? San Jose. Any San Jose in the house? Where you Stockton? You ain't from Stockton no more. That's what you told me. Nah. Any Stockton in the house? All right. What's the city I heard at the top? Menlo Park. East Palo Alto, Menlo Park, Palo Alto. All y'all Peninsula people. Washington, come on, Washington, D.C.'s in the building. Woo. I know you came to see Dr. Angela Davis. You didn't come to see me from Washington, D.C. Somebody say amen, right? Well, give your neighbor a high five and thank him for sitting next to you. Just give him a quick high five. Thank you for sitting next to me. Everyone take your phone out real quick. Wave it at me, please. Take your phone out real quick. Wave it at me. I need you to put your phone on silent, so just take 1 second. Make sure your phone is on silent. We are live, and we don't want interruptions. And if it's not on silent, then turn it off. All right, and just take a few deep breaths. We'll be back in a couple of minutes to get this going. Thank you again for being here, everyone. LW, clap it up for them. We're so grateful for their support. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. All right, I think we're ready to get started. Clap your hands one more time, everybody. Welcome to the DeYoung Museum. My name is Michael McBride. I'm the Executive Director of Live Free USA, and this is the wonderful chairwoman of our board, the great Sherrie Deans. And we're just here to give you all a quick welcome for many of you. How many of this is your first time here in our speaker series? All right, yeah, so, oh my. So yeah, we gotta catch them up, Sherrie.
Well, who came before? What session did you come to? The first one? What was it about? And we spoke with mothers of the movement, right? Who came to the second one? What was it about? Yes. How about the third? All the way in the back in the white shirt? What was the third one about? It was about intersectionality? Mm-hmm. Yes. And we are on the fourth.
We're on the fourth.
So I want to thank everyone at the DeYoung Museum that has supported us. I would describe it expanding the nature of the work that normally happens in this room. We have brought some very, very daring topics, not daring to us, but not the normal thing that happens in a fine arts museum. So I just want to appreciate them for creating that space. I want to thank Google. Where is Adrian?
Yes.
So I wonder if you'd be surprised that this entire thing was funded by the Google Foundation, yes, which is just extraordinary, yes, that they would pay to give voice to these kind of revolutionary thoughts. So I really appreciate the bravery that it takes to let us do what we've been doing. And I want to thank you for coming. There are a lot of things you could be doing this Saturday. I was here yesterday and it was beautiful. Today's not so much, but I know that these days are precious. I know that the time that you're investing to learn and to grow and to expand your thinking is precious time, and we intend to use it wisely for the next hour and a half. So thank you for coming.
Absolutely, and we want you to know that part of our hope for today, as it has been for the whole series of conversations, is to expand the possibility and the capacity of all of us to hold the whole. And the whole certainly is much larger than our four friends and people we like. It is much larger than your own experience. As a matter of fact, part of our task, we think, in these perilous times is to invite all of us into a wide circle of concern and belonging, but putting at the center those who are the most vulnerable, particularly as it relates to the issues of state violence, of state-sanctioned terror and incarceration and punishment. And so this exhibit, hopefully, as we have said many times before, has literally called all of us into this room from very different places. As a matter of fact, if some of us saw each other walking down the street, we would not even speak to each other. And yet, Kehinde Wiley's work has called us to this space. Our hope is that when we leave, we will be more inclined to not just speak to each other, but build a future that is grounded in liberation and inclusion for all people, and do the work that literally dismantles the predatory systems and sensibilities that make all of our lives vulnerable to the violence of the state at the hands of the elites. And so we're so grateful to have you here. I also will just say, many of us have been a part of this conversation longer than others. This exhibit perhaps is becoming a politicizing opportunity for some of us to join the struggle for liberation. And so as we join, or as we continue our work, we do this in the names of so many people who are not able to be here today. There's not been one day in the history of our country where dark-skinned bodies and indigenous bodies have not been subjected to arbitrary violence at the hands of the state. And there's so many folks who are in this room who have been holding the pain and the weight of that. My hope is that as many hands make the load lighter, we'll leave with maybe 300 more folk who are willing to hold that and hasten the day where no one is literally victimized by this violence. So welcome. Black August is the theme. You're going to hear a whole lot of folk help you understand what Black August is. It's very different than Black Thursday. Somebody say amen. It's very different than probably a whole lot of sacred days that you may have on your calendar. And so open your heart, open your mind, and we'll be ready to go. Super excited to bring our first set of guests up to help have this conversation, but turn attention to the screen, and you'll get a chance to get your palate wet for a great conversation. Clap it up one more time, everybody. Welcome.
We are officially in Black August. Historically, August has been a month for movement and transformation, which seems on point for where we are as a country right now. Black August was established in the California prison system in the early 1970s by men and women of the Black liberation movement. Black August holds great significance in the African tradition of resistance against white supremacy and imperialism in the United States. In the late 1970s, the observance and practices of Black August left the prisons of California and was practiced by African American revolutionaries throughout the United States. Since then, it has spread and grown, and there are Black August events in cities throughout the United States and internationally.
So why August? That's because many revolutions for Black liberation happened in the month of August. Nat Turner's Rebellion happened in 1831. The beginning of the Underground Railroad, 1850. The March on Washington, 1963, as well as the NCM's largest march, which happened in 1970. Even to present day, with the protests against neo-Nazis in Charlottesville happening in 2017, all in the month of August.
Therefore, all who are committed to ending oppression should actively participate in Black August. If your timeline has gone back to normal, it's time to shake things up. If your news feed is showing more selfies and less posts around social justice, it's time to let folks know that the fight for racial equity isn't over. Here at Common Justice, we believe that something else is possible in the world and our society, and for us specifically in the criminal justice system. We provide an alternative to incarceration that's centered on accountability, racial equity, and uplifting survivors' voices, invoking the memory of those revolutionaries and giants that we've lost, like Toni Morrison, Elijah P. Cummings, John Lewis, Sylvia Rivera, Marsha P. Johnson, and Lorena Borjas. Let's move through this month, educating, advocating, and supporting the work to become a more equitable society.
Much. So for our first session of Conversins, we're going to have, we like to call it like a speed dating style, but it's going to be speed conversation. Somebody say amen, right? And we're going to put some folks in conversation with each other to help give us some insight on Black August from their particular situatedness in the world. And hopefully it creates more and more space for us to fill in some gaps where we can leave much more educated and committed to the true spirit of Black August. So I'm excited to welcome to the stage first, Rosa Clemente. Clap it up for Rosa. Dr. Rosa Alicia Clemente is an award-winning organizer, speaker, political commentator, producer, independent journalist, scholar, activist, and former vice presidential candidate, a leading voice of her generation, the Bronx-born Black Puerto Rican. Touch your neighbor. With consent, right? She is frequently sought out for her insight and commentary on Afro-Latinx identity, Black and Latinx liberation movements, police violence, colonialism in Puerto Rico, hip-hop feminism, third-party politics, and more. We'll start first, Rosa, with our conversation. And I just want you, obviously, this is a very precious and important month in your journey A lot of us who are a bit late to appreciating what Black August is may come from it with this sense that it started when we started. But perhaps expand and share a little bit, certainly as a scholar and as a participator in keeping the legacy and history of Black August alive. What does this month mean to you, and what do you want us to know?
Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me, Pastor Mike. It's so good to be back with people. It's an incredible feeling. Thank you, everybody out there. And that run for vice president and Cynthia McKinney president, that was the Green Party, where Dr. West is running now. We can have a conversation about electoral politics later, but I know there's Green Party folks here, so.
Are there Green Party folks here?
Oh, yeah, no.
Oh, okay.
And they'll come at me in the best way, like, you didn't run as a Democrat or Republican? No, absolutely not. So look, I was born in the Bronx, 1972, saw the creation of hip hop. I grew up in the Bronx, and I had to go to college to even know who the Young Lords were. I didn't know who they were. I didn't know the Black Panther Party. I didn't even know why Puerto Ricans were citizens. And so for me, I ended up joining the Malcolm X grassroots movement, still my political home to this day. And what we did for over 20 years is Black August, a celebration of hip hop and freedom fighters, where we always highlighted Brother George Jackson, but also making sure that Assad remains free in Cuba. So the first years, what we would do is we'd invite the artists, and we'd have political education. But we were really lucky that was a golden age in hip hop, and we began to see people like Moo Fresh. I mean, Medusa's a legend in Cali and everywhere, but Dead Prez, and I to this day roll with Dead Prez, part of the RBG camp, and we were sitting there, and three brothers are got their orders from Nahanda Abiodun, may she rest in freedom, in Cuba, and we politically educated folks. They gave us political education, and then we would have a concert in New York, and then travel to other places in the world. The show I ended up really producing was when we went to South Africa, Durban particularly, 2001, the United Nations Conference Against Xenophobia, Racism. So that's what hip hop is, But I was telling a lot of my comrades, if we're gonna engage young people, you can't always be looking sad and defeatist and pessimistic. Why would anybody wanna join something like that? Because I had to go to college to become politically educated. It's not like I was born knowing I was a Black Puerto Rican. It was my experiences, and also being with Malcolm X grassroots movement and being in Brooklyn before it was gentrified. So we took the artists to Cuba, Brazil, South Africa, and then a lot of other folks started doing shows. So I was telling a friend of mine, I said, we need to quantify how many people have come through Black August, and we're politicized. And one specific brother, Shaka King, who wrote and directed Judas and the Black Messiah, when he reached out to me to get to Brother Chairman Fred, he said, I grew up in Brooklyn, and I went to a Black August show that you had, and I had never heard of Fred Hampton. So I know the power of that, but the actual successes is anytime we see a political prisoner and a prisoner of war come out, we have to celebrate that victory, but also contextualize it within, it wasn't a 1 year movement or two. We're talking about 30 years people have been on the outside.
Let me break in real quick, because for some folks who are not politicized, political prisoner sounds
like it happens in another country,
not
here.
And so since we're in Black August, right, and we're trying to help folks appreciate the kind of radical claims, right? Not radical in the sense of crazy people, but radical in the sense of a deep, long, lifelong commitment towards an end and a goal. Talk a little bit about just this idea of what political prisoners mean to you. And certainly we have been celebrating and naming the number of political prisoners that have come home as a result of this kind of consistent drumbeat that reaches a culmination in Black August. So give people a context of what political prisoner means, and then perhaps educate folks on just the number of folks that have come home and how long it's taken.
Yeah, so political prisoner of war is how it's thought of as people in other countries, but we have political prisoners to this day, and many of them come out of movements in the late 60s through the early 70s. And in fact, Dr. Barbara Ransby, everybody should read her work, calls that moment the lost years. And she's like, those were the most radical moments, right? So a political prisoner is someone who is held because of their political beliefs. Now, I came through the work with fighting to free the Puerto Rican political prisoners, and we were able to do that because at that time Hillary Clinton was running for Senate. And I was working at the New York State Assembly, and I had to go to the event. And we basically were like, tell your husband to free our people, or you won't be a senator in New York. And that's how we got them out. But one brother stayed behind. It was tactical, you know. But one brother stayed behind.
You made her offer. You made her offer she couldn't refuse.
Right. True. So one brother stayed behind, Oscar Lopez Rivera, and at one time he was the longest held political prisoner. And he stayed because he said, you don't ever leave someone behind. Okay? What we ended up doing was change the tactic to now include parole hearings and probation hearings. And their hearings are coming. And for me, particularly Jalil Muntekin is the political prisoner that I most have contact with. And he was released. And then the Attorney General, a Black woman, Letitia James, stopped him from being released. Then he got COVID, almost died. Then he comes out. He mistakenly says he's, we're not talking. Well, anyway, Jalil Muntekin is the closest one. So what I want to say is, when things may seem impossible, I don't pray. I invoke the name of Mumia and Leonard, and thank you, Marilyn Buck, and thank you, Oscar Lopez, thank you, Lolita, thank you, Pedro Albizu Campos, thank you to the young people, thank you, Ferguson, because we have a political prisoner from Ferguson, and his name is Joshua Williams. So hopefully people will understand, because we have to claim the victories. Now, unfortunately, Russell Maroon Schultz and Atulu Shakur, Tupac's stepfather, they were released because they were literally dying, and they have passed away. But we have Sekou out, Odinga. We got David Gilbert out, Chesa Boudin's father. We got most of the Move 9 out. Some of the Cuban political prisoners that were here in Florida. So I'll just invoke some names. Herman Bell is out. Jalil Muntekin is out. Oscar's out. The other Puerto Rican prisoners are out. Sundiata Akoli, who was Assata Shakur's partner, in the struggle. And I'll end on this. I think 3 weeks ago, there's so many hip hop events happening, and Dead Prez performed in Brooklyn. And my comrade Lumu Bandeli said, I don't think they've met Jalil. I said, no. He sends me a picture with Herman Bell, Sundiata, Sekou Odinga, with Dead Prez. And Dead Prez is really the only, to this day, hip-hop group that even invoked not only our politics, but an international mind frame, and also showing the power of culture when it intersects with politics. So that's what we celebrate. It should be a month of joy and resistance, and let our peoples know, thank you for sacrificing 50 years of your life. And I told you this real quick. When Jalil was released, and I saw him, I just was staring at him. And he's like, why are you looking at me like that? And I'm like, how do you get out of prison, almost died of COVID, and the next day you're still organizing? And he said, what you young people don't understand is we were waiting for a revolution. We committed our lives. If I had to organize on the streets, but whatever ancestors said, he organized in the prison system and has let so many young brothers who could have gone a different way. So every time I see them, I'm just in awe, and I'm grateful, and I'm so grateful for this opportunity.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Pastor Mike.
Yeah. Stay right here. Dorsey Nunn, come on and join us on this panel conversation. Dorsey Nunn is a leading expert with over 40 years of professional experience in criminal justice reform. He is the first formerly incarcerated director of a public interest law office in California, Under his leadership, LSPC has made significant advances, including the development of the Elder Freeman Policy Fellowship, legal victories, including the Ashker lawsuit, ending long-term solitary confinement in California, policy victories, including, yes, clap it up for that, policy victories, including the end of shackling of pregnant women, advancing voting rights for county jail prisoners and people on parole, and numerous, we worked on this together, ban the box laws passed in the public and private sectors. Clap your hands, everybody, for the great Dorsey Nunn in the building. Yes. All right, I'm cutting right to it, Dorsey. I'm cutting right to it because we could be here all day and we can't because we stayed there all night last night, but we can't do it today. You were in San Quentin during this period of time of the original uprising that has been memorialized, called Black August. Talk about what we should know, because it's one thing for us to hear about it, read about it from the outside, but you were actually there on the inside, and that has certainly informed your journey and your politics. But what would you want us to know about Black August, what they won't hear about or read about in the book? And I know you're going to talk, so give it to us.
Excuse me. I got to first center myself just a little bit because I start cursing. And I just learned how to turn off my cell phone. You inspired me to do that, Angela. I got there in February of 1972. And like when people talk about Black August, for some of us on the inside, our political prisoners are not being included on the list.
Mm. So, for instance,
right, because what the hell did we call George Jackson? Mm. What the hell did we call Rachel McGee? Mm. And that inspired Black August. That's who inspired Black August. The death of them inspired Black August. Mm. Man, we was on the yard when we was being tortured. And the people in the months and our heroes gave us strength. It gave us inspiration. Angela, you don't know how many nights I dreamed about you. It's not that kind of dream. I didn't dream about the natural. I dreamed about the courage. Like everybody fell in love with the natural. I fell in love with the courage.
It's good.
That was on the real, So like the last surviving, we just released Rochelle McGee. That's historic in nature. Homeboy walked out 64 years. When we talked about closing Pelican Bay short quarter, who was there? It was the people who wasn't necessarily political prisoners going in. They was politicized, right? They were the people they put in the hole. They were the people they were still putting in the hole in the event that they read George Jackson's book.
So unpack that for folks, because that may run past folks. So, folks that just come to prison for whatever reason, then they get in prison and they become politicized, and then they get actually.
I can absolutely tell you, when I wore the tam and a black leather coat, it was a fashion statement when I went in. When I got in, I met Jalil in 1972. That's who was there in DVI when I got to DVI in 72. When I met Jalil, Jalil was politicizing the whole yard. It was things that we was practicing was political education. Some parts of me learning how to read is that I couldn't wait to stand in front of a group of brothers to start talking about what I thought about stuff. I had divergent opinions from a whole bunch of people around the Soul on Ice book.
And you told us last night, right, that you read the text, not in a bound book.
Hold it. And George, the blood in my eye, being that it was already banned from prison, I read A Blood in My Eye written in longhand on legal paper. And I didn't read it in sequential order because we were just shifting around. We were smuggling around the context of blood in our eye. Right? Man, when we talk about Black August, it was burpees, setups, push-ups, and education. Political education. You know, they took me from the point of girly magazines to reading Fanon. You know, because at first, you know, We Magazine was great at the beginning. At the end of the thing, you know, it was Fanon, Ralph Ellison, it was Cornforth. It was a whole bunch of other stuff that we got an opportunity to read. You know, so like, if you get killed 50 years ago, most of us in the audience, nobody remember your name. George Jackson still invoke memories of people's name, and they're still holding people in hold, and they still soldiering up based on his commitment to the cause.
Can you just say a quick word of why? Why is the name George Jackson and all that has followed his legacy still such a frightening thing for wardens and correctional officers 50 years later?
Because he taught us how to stand up. He taught us how to stand up. You know, when I mentioned Rochelle McGee, Angela was the only one that ever told me, that confirmed it, that Rochelle McGee, when he was in the courthouse, what he considered it was a slave rebellion. That's what it was. I can remember asking Angela when they got to close to 1 million people, I can remember asking this stupid question.
You was cursing in my church last night. Don't treat the museum better than my church. Give it to him, Dorsey. Now.
You know, the stupid question I asked Angela one time is, do you think they'd be satisfied with holding 1 million people? And she told me no. We done got up to 2 million, and I don't suspect that they're still tired. And they will eat our children. Right? So like, what happens when they push out the concept of rehabilitation? What happens when I'm rehabilitated and the rest of society is not? You know, white supremacy, structural racism, discrimination, all those other things. You know, and if I didn't go in as a political person, if it's something I want you to take away, crime is generally not the first choice. It's generally your last option. So like, you know, if you don't think about what do you do for those people coming home, if you don't attempt to free them, by the way, I need to say, I made one major promise when I was coming home. And I promised to my elders that was in prison to return to the community an asset instead of a liability.
Yes. Well, I think you've done that.
And it was a whole bunch of other people that they made. I thought they saying like Dorsey was special. I didn't know they was telling everybody to do that shit. Excuse me, Mike. You know, I didn't suspect that. You know, and you know, and the reality of it is that I held my promise.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, you know, when people said that I was crazy and they said ban the box, 267 million people stay in the jurisdiction in which the box has been banned. When we said we closed down long-term solitary confinement in Pelican Bay, we was just granting a little bit of relief to the other political prisoners that they was holding while they was there. because some people still came home.
Yeah.
So when I'm thinking about, Rochelle McGee, this time when you said, is it anything I need to ask? Probably somebody's gonna be standing outside that door, because what we got embedded in the California Constitution, Article 1, Section 6, still allows California to hold slaves in the state of California, and they call it involuntary servitude. So all of these people up here that's paying the tax dollars to these other people, you're paying them to hold slaves. And just because they don't have out picking cotton, if the state of California got $14 billion tied up into the Department of Corrections and theoretically rehabilitation, you got a large bill that you're paying, and your kids could be going to college, old people could be getting fed, you could have public housing and doing a whole bunch of other stuff other than torturing people. And by the way, the thing that I'm asking you to do is to probably call your elected official if you're in California and ask them what are they going to do about slavery. Because at this particular point, Attica, they were struggling and making a demand that they would be treated like human beings. I know we didn't build a whole movement, but have we genuinely made progress? Because some of the demands that we're making, we've been making those demands for over 50 years. So I done talked enough, and I'm just thanking God that I didn't cuss as much as I normally do.
Dorsey Nunn, everybody, clap your hands for Dorsey. All right. Y'all head on back to your seats. So we're going to bring up our next couple of conversants real quick. Philip Agnew. No, going back.
I'm staying with
No, you can have it, yeah. Philip Agnew is the oldest of 4 boys, born to a preacher and a teacher in the West Englewood neighborhood on the south side of Chicago, Illinois. He is a co-founder of the Dream Defenders and Black Men Build, where he currently serves the organization as the co-director. He is a nationally recognized educator, strategist, writer, trainer, speaker, and cultural critic. Put your hands together for Philip Agnew, everyone. All right, Phil. So I just want you to give some quick reactions to what you just heard. Just as someone who is, a bit younger.
Just a bit.
Just a bit,
Yep.
But, I think I say this, you got politicized late, in your young, 20s and things like that after you went to college.
I got politicized late, radicalized early.
Yes,
Yeah.
right. And so, as Rosa stated, a lot of us didn't hear about this stuff in our regular elementary, high school education. And you're someone actively trying to keep the rigor of Black August alive through your literature and your organizing. So just hearing some of those remarks, I just love to get your quick take before we go down a little bit of a rabbit hole.
Well, all I'll say is, one, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to be in the Bay, and to be here and to be in the middle of all of this feels amazing. As I share that joy, at just being around people, being around our people. I've been kind of hunkered down. Well, the only thing I'll say is Black August is not another Black History Month, right? It's not just a general celebration of Blackness and let's just throw everything in Black August. Black August is a month where we fast, we study, and we train, as we've heard, right? It's a month where we remember that there are thousands of Black people, indigenous folks, women, immigrants who are in the gulags currently that we forget about, who only committed the crime of standing up and saying that the crimes against the world that this country commits every single day are unconscionable, right? And so it is also a part of a larger process of us elevating the struggle of our enemy combatants to an international level. We call them prisoners of war and political prisoners, and as was stated already, we think of this as, this is something that happens in another part of the world, right? But the Black Panthers elevated a consciousness that said we lived in an occupied land, right? We were a domestic colony. And so almost, with few exceptions, almost every Black person, woman, queer, indigenous, immigrant person who has been arrested and incarcerated in this country could be considered a political prisoner, right? And so it's important for us to remember this month to fast, right, from sunup to sundown. Some people do variations of that. Within Black Men Build, we do sunup to sundown. To study, to show yourself approved, you should have a book, get off social media, get off the TV, right? And to train. As he said, burpees. You know, that's an intense level of training, right?
Yes, it is.
For anybody that has tried burpees. But you could walk, you know. There are other things that you could do of a variety of physical abilities that you could do to make sure that you're tailoring your body to it. So what I heard was a reassertion of the importance for all of us who deign to be revolutionaries to remember we are the only revolutionary people or people who aspire to revolutionary values that forgets about our people when they're thrown in prison, many of them in solitary confinement, right, for 20, 30, 40 years, and then released back to us with a quality of living almost nothing. You know, Jaleel talked about at a conference we were at earlier, many of these sisters and brothers are released, don't even have a bed to lay on, right? What is the thing that we are leaving? What is the world that we are creating for those folks? They almost died. They are dying every day behind those walls, and then they get out, and we can't even show up to meetings on time, right? We fighting about things that are inconsequential when it comes to getting us free. And so that's what Black August is for me and the people within Black Men Build. It is an opportunity to reconnect with why we are in the movement, the seriousness of what we're doing, the fact that all of us are in jail, some of us are behind bars, and we've got a responsibility every single day to remember them and to aspire to have the commitment that they have.
Yes. Now, one of the things that we thought would be important as we were pulling this together was to intentionally have an intergenerational kind of representation as much as we can about how and why this level of training and studying and fasting is such an important rigor and rhythm. Your journey, obviously, with the Dream Defenders started in the aftermath of Trayvon Martin's murder. And you, for some years, led a whole generation of young people, not just in Florida, but you're all organizing with the cultivating with BYP 100, and you're part of a lot of different formations. Just talk a little bit about the intergenerational imperative for maintaining and organizing apparatus against all these manifestations of state-sanctioned violence and repression.
Well, I'm laughing because, you know, I'm 38, so.
I do.
Yes, so.
But it's important.
My ability, no, I'm just saying my ability to be the resident young person is expired. But I will say.
Well, let me ask this: how old were you when you started?
I was 27.
All right.
But when I first started organizing, it was in college at Florida A&M University, the number one historically Black college in the world.
We don't want no set tripping in here.
Yeah, no.
HBCU people, they be set tripping. I'm not trying to understand.
No. I just want to make sure that it's on the record and actual and factual. Just the band, the business.
Oh, here we go.
Okay, but what I will say is, I have never. This seems to be.
It's good. No, you got to speak into it.
I have never.
Probably because of the FAMU comment. Man.
Okay, yeah.
See, you got somebody. You got somebody up there. That's
right,
probably
Tennessee State or something up
there. Here we go.
HU. Which one? Which one? All right. So what I will say is, I have been extremely blessed, and the folks around me have been blessed. I'm not singularly blessed in this respect. I have never been a victim of the adage that the older generation don't want to talk to us, they don't want to listen to us. And from the time that I've been a part of the movement, whether it was in college, whether it was after college, I have been extremely blessed and edified by our veterans in the movement. Whether it be SNCC, whether it be Black Panther veterans, whether it be Dr. Angela Davis answering our call and email and becoming a board member for the Dream Defenders. For me, there are years of my life that I have been able to make it through depression, anxiety, confusion, a lack of direction, solely because of the words and the guidance and the tutelage and just answering a text message or email from a veteran in the movement or someone who was in the movement of, a year before me. Rosa has been there for us all the way from the beginning. And so for me, what I would say the importance of intergenerational communication and dialogue and building of a movement is paramount. One cannot hope to move our people forward if we decide that the learnings and the blueprint and the successes and the failures of the people that came before us are no longer relevant to what we do. No one, and so we have, and now at being the tender young age of 38, I have a responsibility, right, to be working with folks younger, whether they want to hear it or whether I understand them or not, which I do, but whether we agree on everything, to contribute that knowledge that I was an empty vessel, and I have been, the closest I've been to full has been in conversation with our elders who told us, I did that. You could try, but it's not gonna go, like you think.
Would you agree, or do you resonate with this feeling some of us have that there are forces trying to pit the youth against the elders?
Absolutely. Look, our opposition is quite intergenerational. From the time
our opposition is
yes. From the time our opposition has offspring, they are training them up in the way of empire, right? In the formalities, in the way to devise your institutions, in the way of language, in the way of economy. And so for us to hope to beat them in the battle, we have to be. And so our opposition uses, their playbook is quite simple. They are not gods. They go back to the same playbook every single generation. It's divide and conquer, right? And I'm stealing this from Dr. Davis. They dismember. Right? They dismember the young people from the old. They dismember us racially. They dismember our minds from our bodies and from our spirits. They want us to have amnesia, right? They want us to forget that we have succeeded against them before. And so it is a central part of their strategy to make sure that we don't talk to folks who are older than us, or we say they don't understand us. Now, there are some folks, right, whose hands have clasped the torch quite tightly, right? And
quite tightly,
yes, and the arthritis has begun to calcify around it. But I think we can't be bad faith actors. There are a number of folks who are waiting, right, for us to ask the right questions, to ask the wrong questions, just to be in a posture of learning. And I think that's what we have a responsibility to do, because it also just feels great when you're hearing an elder speak and you're like, dang, I thought that too. Right. You know what I'm saying? Like, damn, I thought that too. I'm smart like them, right. So for me, I think that is our responsibility now to remember those dismembered things. It's not me, that's Dr. Davis, or at least that's where I heard it, right? To remember those dismembered things, to remember our connection, right? And if I don't get another opportunity, I want to say that is another brilliance of this exhibit, right? I had the opportunity a few weeks ago to be in Peru, right? And to go on a journey with ayahuasca, right? And one of the things that they taught us in that journey, right, is that the plants are calling out to us, not the reverse, right? To remember the knowledge that they once shared with us, right? And so to be in this exhibit and see Black folks adorned in vines and adorned in the plants and adorned in nature, it is not a new thing. It is not a confusing or a, wow, how did those things wind up together? It is a return. And so that is what this moment is calling for us to return to that which is already ours, right? It is already our destiny to have it. We just have to reach out and take it and grab it.
Philip Agnew, everybody, clap your hands for him. All right, I'm running behind, so I'm gonna just hurry up and get. No, stay. No, you stay. Because speaking of this intergenerational kind of passing the torch without the hands calcifying and not, Latifah Simon, come on to the stage, is a 25-year veteran, organizer, nationally recognized advocate for civil rights and social justice. She is also an elected member of the Bay Area Rapid Transit, that's the BART, for all y'all that never knew what BART stood for, right? Board of Directors and the president of the MeadowFund. Latifah has also worked as the executive director of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights of the San Francisco Bay Area. Currently, she is running for California's 12th Congressional District for the 2024 United States Congress in California. Latifah, I don't even need to prompt you, girl, because you know what you're supposed to say. You know how you're going to say it. So what you got to say, girl?
I really wanted you to prompt me.
You want me to prompt you?
Yeah, please.
All right.
Please,
well,
please,
I got a prompted question
all right,
for you.
I need it, Pastor.
We have, in this moment, had to endure an uninterrupted spate of state-sanctioned violence that has moved beyond someone say, this happened to me and no one was there to witness it, to being recorded on TV and people still deny it happens, to this exhibit that has so powerfully captured the silencing of Black people's lives. And there's an intergenerational element to this idea of what does it mean when our lives are so vulnerable and people refuse to believe it's happening. So I guess one of the things that I love about you, I know about you, is that in every seat you sat in, you bring the concerns of our people to that seat. Whether it's working for Kamala Harris, whether it's working for the Lawyers Committee, whether it's working for the Bay Area, the women's
Young Women's Freedom Center is in the house today.
Yes, I know. I just had a brain freeze. The Young Women's Center, whether it's BART, whether all of these different places. And so for someone who perhaps may not consider themselves to be an organizer or this kind of, revolutionary in these ways we describe it, caricature it, what keeps you bringing the concerns of your people to every one of these spaces without compromise?
Faith.
Say more.
By the way, disclaimer, this is my pastor. He married me to the love of my life, and he also eulogized that man. I love you. Buried that man, Kevin Weston, so I bring his energy into the room today. I appreciate a good organizer is someone who deeply studies. And we have the brilliant opportunity to hear from Dr. Davis. If you haven't given it up, give it up just before she comes on. Because for us who have committed our very lives to the liberation of our people and to the diaspora of all indigenous people, if you read Dr. Davis, she challenges us not only to sit in the pathology of the war that the state has profoundly injected in our everyday lives, she asks us to imagine and then work towards that thing. I absolutely want to work and have worked, and we all are working for a world without prisons. And she pushes us to think, well, what would that look like? If children every single day leave skipping down the street on a bus to a school with teachers that are paid in the 6 and somewhat 7 figures, if there's food in the morning, if the books are beautiful, if they are told about their inherent understanding about their linkage to their God, to their great-grandmother, if they come home and mom is home by 3 because she's paid well, if grandmother has the beauty to be taken care of by staff members who love her as she is dying, You don't have to have young men and women making life or death decisions on corners around the world. So then we can imagine a world that doesn't put people in cages for making bad decisions. So why I was so humbled that you asked me to be here today, because it was almost 30 years ago that Dr. Davis asked 3,000 people in the auditorium of Cal Berkeley to commit our whole lives to a critical resistance, to a depth of understanding that we need to be in all places. We need to be with bullhorns, right? We need to shake institutions down, and we also need to be behind the dais. That we have a critical responsibility not to just ask a man, a woman, a system to make changes. We actually have to corral ourselves and figure out dialectically how to understand law, how to understand finance, how to understand the ways in which the wicked has been built. And because we are people of faith and goodness, we have not torn down the oppressors that have killed our grandmothers, that we work through faith with the understanding and the acknowledgement that every seat that we sit in, we not only do good, we slowly break apart. So if folks ask, well, Latifah, you were organizer, you were supposed to be working towards the liberation of our people. I ask you, if you think about this, why go to Congress? Well, as my husband was dying in a hospital, I saw the state violent sanctionary practices when people go home because they can't get treatment, because pharmaceutical companies decide who lives and who dies. Let's not relegate Black life, let's relegate the drug companies. Let's make sure that children and their grandparents and everyone between lives in beloved communities free from deep degradation. So the answer to your question is, in this month of Black August, when we study, I think it is important to study the reality of the Greensboro massacre, to see the deep evil of state, but also at the same time, as many of us have, commit to the promise, not of this country, but to our Father. That we are owed the greatness of joy and beauty and a life filled of dignity, where we can be in brother and sisterhood, where trans children don't have to worry about the foot of bad government on their necks, because we will take that foot off and place a high heel on it, and women will be in power and ensure that our babies are taken care of. So every place that we are, whether you're working in a coffee house or you're in the halls of Congress, we can be cognizant, and we can be a dream of our grandmothers who didn't have a soapbox, and imagine and be in a world that loves on you when you hurt people, that caresses you and brings you back to your humanity. Do we know what that looks like? We have never seen it, but we will work towards that together.
Come on, y'all. Come on, y'all. Come on, y'all. Come on, y'all. Lord, there's so much I want to do, and that clock is on my neck.
And you got all these Black people who like to talk.
What is time? It ain't nothing but a thing on my neck today. No. You got a chance, obviously, to see the exhibit, and this will be my final question, both of you. Then we're going to kind of move on and get Dr. Davis up here and create an intergenerational conversation with our remaining guests. But what did the exhibit speak or do for you?
I was hoping actually that you wouldn't ask this question. There are sisters and siblings from the Young Women's Freedom Center here today, and when I see the exhibit, and I saw it a few times, I think of our sweet brother Benko Brown. Benko Brown was in his early 20s and stole some candy from Walgreens here in San Francisco. And a Black man who was a security guard, who was fairly untrained, shot him in his back as he walked out to go to the Young Women's Freedom Center for Political Education. Benko never made it as a trans Black young person. When we think about the death of our young people who will never get an opportunity to grow old, not just because of state-sanctioned violence, the way that we think about dealing with folks that we're mad at in this country, it is death, it is incarceration. But I also saw the image of rest. And should our babies just rest when they are taken before the age of 50? Or should they be entitled to a childhood? A childhood where we're not just offering them jobs to be peaceful, that we're allowing them to be silly and young and have places to play. On beds of roses. On beds of roses, in backyards and in parks. We have adultified children with brown and black skin in this country. Under this administration, we still have hundreds of children at the Southwest Key program in cages because the land was safer than the water, and their mothers and fathers pushed them to walk across borders. So we see rest and we see death. And our children, by all means, and I have 2 babies, may not grow old despite the privilege that I may have in this moment. And it makes me want to work 15 hours, 20 hours a day, because I want young men to be able to love freely and lay in fields of flowers. It seems crazy that I would even say that. Black men should be able to rest and lay in fields of grass. It's not utopian. It is your birthright, sir.
Yes, 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 yes. Well, I thank you both. We are going to prepare to bring Dr. Angela Davis up to help us just become much more centered in this conversation. There's a video we prepared that I recall showing my staff from the Black Power mixtape some years ago. And I told Dr. Davis I wanted to play that and let that be the invitation for her to begin to speak to us, particularly as we think of intergenerational imperative for the work we do. You know, I'm a 4th generation holiness Pentecostal pastor, which means we do speak in tongues, swing from the chandelier. On a good Sunday, we levitate. Somebody say amen, right? But during COVID, one of the things that became very obviously painful to me is we lost, because of the unfortunate misinformation of COVID, we lost dozens of bishops and mothers across our denominations because they refused to stop going to church because of super spreaders. And the amount of elders we've lost that could have been avoided has caused me to appreciate that we are losing wisdom before we even get the opportunity to have that wisdom downloaded to us so we can not make the same errors. And so I'm excited to have Dr. Angela Davis here to join us. Turn attention to the screen and we'll prepare to bring her up in a quick minute.
Yeah, but the question is more, how do you get there? Do you get there by confrontation, violence?
Oh, is that the question you were asking?
Yeah.
See, that's another thing. When you talk about a revolution, most people think violence, without realizing that the real content of any kind of revolutionary thrust lies in the principles and the goals that you're striving for, not in the way you reach them. On the other hand, because of the way this society is organized, because of the violence that exists on the surface everywhere, you have to expect that there are going to be such explosions. You have to expect things like that as reactions. If you are a black person and live in the black community all your life and walk out on the street every day seeing white policemen surrounding you, when I was living in Los Angeles, for instance, long before the situation in LA ever occurred, I was constantly stopped. No, the police didn't know who I was, but I was a black woman and I had a natural, and they, I suppose, thought that I might be a, quote, militant. And when you live under a situation like that constantly, and then you ask me, whether I approve of violence. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense at all.
Dr. Angela Davis, everybody. Bless you. Thank you so much. I mean, every time I watch that, I laugh uncontrollably. It's like, that just doesn't make any sense. It's like, and clearly it doesn't make any sense. But Dr. Davis, welcome. Thank you for being here. This is an honor for so many of us. When you look at that young woman up there on the screen with the natural, still got it, the natural cooking. What stands out to you given the long journey that that young woman was embarking on back then?
Well, first of all, good afternoon, everyone. Is this working?
Yes, it's on.
And thank you, Pastor Mike.
Yes.
For it's not on, is it? Oh yeah, this is better.
Yes.
So,
we got to hear you now.
So good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Pastor Mike, for inviting me to participate in this phenomenal series of conversations in connection with the exhibition we've all seen. What do I think about what I saw on the screen?
Yes.
Well, I think there have been an enormous number of changes. A lot of changes happen, and no changes happened at all. I'm, kind of thinking inside that contradiction, and it also makes me reflect on why, even though we might feel that we shouldn't be repeating ourselves all the time, it tells me something about the value of repetition. Because we look around and we see that nothing has really changed at all. But at the same time, a great deal has changed. We found new ways of talking about the same problems we have been confronting, for decades and centuries. But when I say the value of repetition, I also acknowledge the fact that there are new ways of discussing old issues. I listened to all of the panelists who've come before me, and I really, really give thanks to Dorsey and Phil Agnew and Rosa Clemente, and of course our next Congresswoman, Lateefah Simon, whom I met, 25 years ago? When we were organizing critical resistance, and she was involved with the Young Women's
Freedom Center.
Freedom Network. So on the one hand, it makes me feel very sad, but on the other hand, I realize that Black people especially, and others who have struggled for freedom and have recognized the importance of looking toward a different kind of future, that our most important successes reside in the fact that we're able to pass that message of struggle down to new generations. And that is our role, to keep that impulse for freedom alive. And like I often say, that is why the contributions of Black people in this part of the world are so important. Because Black people have, believe it or not, kept alive that impulse to struggle for freedom for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Yes.
And that is a phenomenal accomplishment.
Yes.
And perhaps even more important than that, Black people have created beauty in the process of standing up to the oppression and the pain and suffering.
Yes.
And I think that is what a lot of people feel about the exhibition here.
Yeah,
today.
thank you for that. Let's turn our attention to the exhibition real quickly. Just any quick reflections about the exhibition and the role that art and image and even having something so meticulously, significantly pulled together. What is the impact of that as you think about how we continue to keep alive the impulse for the struggle for freedom?
Well, did you say quick?
Quick can be relative. Remember, I'm a Black preacher, so my quick, be long.
No, I ask you that because it's really complicated.
Yes.
And I think that because we live in the United States of America and are subject to all of the ideologies that surround us, we're always searching for the quick answer. We want the instantaneous solution. We thrive on fast food and fast everything. And it doesn't work that way. Life is not quick in that sense. I guess what I would say is that this exhibition of work by Kehinde Wiley urges us to reflect on the history of art, the history of institutions like this. I wonder if there have been any other times when there have been as many Black people at the same time in this museum.
Touch your baby.
And so we have to thank Kehinde Wiley for bringing us together, for making it possible for us to come and reflect on how it is we move in the direction of freedom. What we have to do in order to counter racist state violence that has been with us since the very origins of our history and certainly the history of this country. But at the same time, we have to recognize that it's complicated. It's not simple. I look at the beauty of the pieces, and I wonder how it is possible to think more deeply about the work that has to be done in order to move beyond a world that is based on colonialism and violence and racism and, yes, patriarchy, which is something that we should be talking about here this afternoon. But we also have to be critical. And being critical does not mean giving up on what it is you are critical of. So if you want to approach the exhibition critically, we might say that it's not enough to simply replace Black figures, replace the white figures with Black figures, that we have to think about the overall structure of the institution, the structure of our society, and by the way, the relevance and importance of George Jackson and those who founded Black August to us today is that George, for example, was thinking not only about challenging incarceration because we needed to free political prisoners, which we obviously did and do need to do, But he was also thinking about the fact that the institution of the prison provides us. Is that Dorsey over there again? Dorsey, who don't.
I'm not snitching nobody off.
Okay. I was going to say, I thought you had learned how to turn off your notifications. But George was the one who told us that as important as it was to free political prisoners, we also had to reflect on the institution of the prison and how structural racism is most dramatically represented in such institutions as the prison and the police. So I was saying that we have to think critically.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And we have to recognize the extent to which we are all very much influenced by capitalism. And I want to say that because capitalism is what is given to us. We inhabit capitalism. Our dreams are affected by capitalism. I was going to wear my my Jordans today, but but I said no, I can't be doing that.
We all need our guilty pleasure. Somebody say amen. I'd love for you to say a little bit more about Black August, particularly because, you know, a lot of us are still learning about it. I mean, it's really interesting how things can happen in our country, in our own, you know, I'm from San Francisco. Things can happen a stone's throw from where I was born and raised, and I not even know about it. And it is almost as if one of the sinisterly brilliant things this country has been able to do is to keep us so unaware of both the levels and complexity of the oppression, but also the uninterrupted efforts to dismantle that oppression happening all around us at the same time. And so, you know, as we're still learning about George Jackson and Black August, I'd love for you to just, you know, again, from your historical journey and your participation in all of that time, what do you feel we ought to, all of us who are still learning about the fullness of what it means, what do you think we ought to be continuing to glean from the legacy of a Black August? Again, not something that was started in Ferguson, where a lot of us kind of, you know, started to practice it, but it was something that is.
But then, you know, but that's okay.
It is okay,
That's
but it can't be we can't erase though. I think that's the thing that I'm just mostly concerned about is we can't erase the history because then we become ahistorical in our own struggle. And I don't want that to happen. And there's some of us who are church people that don't know nothing about Black August even to this day. So, and I know that to be true because when you bring it up, we still a little bit in the not know.
Well, I think it's just now that we're beginning to see a more widespread consciousness of Black August, and there's so many ways we could talk about it. But I want to emphasize, first of all, that the observance of Black August emanates from the struggles of people in prison behind bars. And I think it's the only observance that has moved from the inside to the outside. And I say that because it's important for us to recognize today, even as we have a relatively mature movement for the abolition of imprisonment, for the abolition of the police, even as increasing numbers of people are aware of the need to do something about the situation in not only inside prisons, but in terms of detention facilities, in terms of the child protective services, and all of those carceral institutions that still define our lives in this country. So I think it is important to continue to remind ourselves that there is so much beauty, there is so much intelligence, there's so much brilliance that is incarcerated today. And therefore, observing Black August is one way in which we remind ourselves that we can take leadership from those who are inside. That those who are inside can help us move in the direction of a more equitable, more liberatory society. So for me, that's really important, especially now. And in that context, I want to, again, Dorsey talked about the fact that Ruchell McGee, who was my co-defendant, was released after some 64 years behind bars. I mean, that should literally be unimaginable.
Yes.
But unfortunately, it's not. And I was telling Dorsey that the first person who compared incarceration to imprisonment, in terms of my own experience, was Ruchell. And now, of course, everyone knows about that connection. There are scholars who have written vast numbers of books about the relationship between imprisonment and slavery. But it was Ruchell McGee who first, in my own experience, began to talk about that connection. And I am so happy. I'm very sad that it took 64 years, but I'm so happy that he will not be compelled to spend his last days and his last hours behind bars.
Yes, yes.
And what everyone else has said about Black August, the mandate to study, to reflect, and yes, also to fast. I haven't been doing that so well in that respect. But thank you so much for reminding me. I have another 10 days or so.
I got the rest of my life to do it. So. One of the concerns many of us have in this moment is the way in which narratives around crime are being used by lots of folks, elected officials, business folk, church folk, neighborhood folk. You go to a neighborhood meeting in some parts of our cities, or if you go on that Nextdoor app, I mean, you just find a narrative about crime easily being weaponized in ways that I remember when I was in high school in the 90s, and the tough on crime era just literally swept through Hunters Point and took many of my friends, just off the streets like overnight. And
but what's new about that?
It's nothing new about it, but that's what's even more distressing, Dr. Davis, is it seems like people who should know better ain't doing better. And I'm wondering.
Well, no, you're absolutely right.
Mm-hmm.
But who was it who was talking about historical amnesia? I think it was Phil who was talking about the kind of amnesia to which we are all subject. We do not learn growing up in a place like the United States of America to value history. And if we don't value history, we can't recognize that we've been through this already. Yeah. This has happened before. the major weapon that was used against the civil rights movement was the equation of Black liberation struggles and crime. I get really angry when I think about that because we should know by now.
Yes.
And what we're witnessing, I think, is an effort on the part of these institutions, the institution of the prison, the institution of the police, to recover from the effects of the movements around George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and basically, what happened during the pandemic and the new consciousness that existed for a while of the structural character of racism. And so, there was a time when I was thinking in 2020 that this is the perfect time to guarantee that Mumia Abu Jamal is free.
Yes.
Because finally the police are on the defensive. Yes. And I had never, ever experienced a time in my years on this planet where the police were on the defensive. And so they are attempting to recover their losses, and they're doing it by calling out again, relying on this method of what Frederick Douglass called imputing crime to color. So we want to go all the way back to the period of slavery. Frederick Douglass recognized how easy it was to use those so-called anti-crime weapons against Black people. And an important element of racism is the criminalization of Blackness.
That's right.
So we see this happening again. We see, I'm thinking about Cop City in Atlanta and the way in which they are attempting to create the largest training grounds for police, not only in Georgia and in Atlanta, but for police all over the country. And the assaults on the environmental movement in connection with that effort to strengthen the police.
And being done under a Black Democrat, quote unquote, mayor, again, which complicates for many folks who, I don't want to just say this in a pejorative manner, but, are you politicized, are you progressive, are you woke, however you want to describe it. There was a time where it seemed much easier to identify your political enemy or antagonist. And now it appears that we no longer need Bull Connors in order to pass a Cop City or in order to, clear homeless encampments, unhoused encampments out, or in order to unleash unaccountable policing on poor Black and brown young people. We don't need Bull Connors anymore. We have people who claim to be our political champions. And that confuses so many folks who are literally, and I say this with a deep sense of sensitivity, we do a lot of anti-gun violence work all across the country. People are living in communities where they feel overrun by open air lethal conflicts between community members. So much so they're afraid to leave their home, afraid to have their kids go to the park. Who am I going to call? But then you realize sometimes if I call the police, I may be the one ending up dead myself. And so it's a hell of a conundrum. Lots of people, I think, are in to understand that I am surrounded by the ubiquitous nature of violence, and yet who is taking the time politically to create solutions that don't fall back into this amnesia. And that perhaps then is the role of the people organizing ourselves to ensure we have better elected officials and better legislators, but it does appear to me that there is a conundrum we have politically around this that is tied to not just the criminalization of black people.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, of course we need better elected officials, but we have a tendency to give up our own empowerment and to hand it to elected officials and expect. And I mean, I know that Latifah understands this, that one can only be effective as an elected official if there are those who are willing to do the organizing work and do the demonstrations and do the community work that is necessary to keep the elected official on track. Elected officials are now saviors. I mean, if anybody's going to save us, it's going to be us. So I had to, in Atlanta, the city council had declared Angela Davis Day or something like that, and gave me this big award, and I had to give it back to them. I had to say, I'm sorry, but as long as you are in support of an institution that is going to increase racism and patriarchy and capitalism in this country and in the world, I cannot do that.
Okay, this won't be, well, I want to ask you this. How do you feel about folk who love to celebrate your work but won't be a part of implementing your work? So this is a great example. I know, like, if I were to ask the average Congressional Black Caucus member about Angela Davis, boy, you are a hero. If I were to ask them about, interestingly enough today, the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, oh my goodness, these CBC members be falling over themselves talking about how great they were. But these Negroes, when they get in the room, cannot figure out a way to create a political bloc in the Congress to secure much of anything for our people. And it for me, I'm proximal to a lot of some of these spaces. My level of frustration, rises to the point of, speaking in tongues, so I say man, right? But as someone who is still among us, who, there was a time where you were not celebrated, and now you are celebrated. Not saying that you do it for the celebration, but I'm curious about, is there ever a need for us to, I don't know what I'm really trying to ask you. I guess I'm trying to expose the dissonance that I feel sitting in rooms knowing that these folks aren't really trying to do what you did, but claim your legacy.
Well, yeah, but it's not about me. And it's about movements. It's about people coming together. It's not about individuals. And I cannot accept all of those accolades if they are meant to celebrate me as an individual. Nothing I have ever done that is of any importance have I done by myself. Never. And I was talking about capitalism. The individualism that promotes capitalism is still so influential in every way in this country. And I was talking about being critical before, and in relation to the exhibition. I think we have to go further than the individual figure. We have to go further than simply acknowledging that we feel pain and are oppressed and suffer as individuals, because it's not about individuals. And And we're not going to win unless we imagine ourselves as a collective, as a community. And so that's the only thing I want. I want acknowledgement for everybody who has participated in the effort to keep the struggle for freedom alive. I do not care about receiving individual accolades. Believe me.
Yeah. Our last few moments, just in this format. Love to invite you to give us 2 quick thoughts. What brings you a sense of great hope? And what is a caution that you would offer to us given the many ways threats and challenges are emerging?
Well, what gives me hope is the fact that young people are just phenomenal. I mean, I marvel at the fact that young people who are political, who are doing this work, have a much more profound grasp of what it is we're fighting against and what it is we're fighting for than I ever did when I was young. So I'm happy that the work that many of us have done over the years has not only been taken up by younger generations, but it has been expanded. It has been made more complex. As I often say, our political awareness was largely in terms of black and white. And of course, we know that the world is not just black and white. We know that it's not just this country, that we have to think internationally. We have to have a kind of internationalism. We can't think only of black and white because that's a masculinist way of thinking about the world. When you say black and white, you're basically talking about black men and white men, right? And this is an era when we've seen the LGBTQ community rise up. There's so many amazing things that have happened recently in the context of the struggle. If we can effectively challenge assaults on trans people, and if we can, within such a relatively short period of time, learn how to use pronouns differently. If we can change the what is represented as the normal, not by folks like what's his name down in Florida,
DeSantis. Yeah.
Well,
you can use that feel when you get back, bro.
Yeah, but I try not to pollute the conversation by calling the names of certain folks.
Sorry.
And that is an African tradition because calling names imparts power. So we want to
Can I call him the devil still? Or?
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay.
Thank you. Angela Davis, everybody. Come on. Wonderful, wonderful. All right. Now, we're going to do something a little different. We have an intergenerational conversation, in as much as we, are able to pull a few folks from different generations into a conversation with Dr. Davis. We're going to bring Dr. Davis back to the stage and a few of our guests that are here to literally create an intergenerational conversation that we all get to sit in on and listen. We thought it would be powerful to have this form of dialogue with Dr. Davis whereby they can engage her with questions, inquiries, particular things that are on their heart and mind. And rather than her just being peppered with questions outside of a context of relationship, there will be folks that she's in relationship with that will allow us to get an opportunity to see what sitting at the feet of an elder feels like and looks like as we continue to commit ourselves to a season of Black August, perhaps that extends beyond just 1 month. And so we're excited to be able to bring these folks to the stage. Turn attention to the screen. We got another little video to help ground us in what we continue to believe is an important acknowledgement of the persistent and insistent reality of state violence in this country to too many of our loved ones. And following the video, we will jump into a wonderful dialogue with Dr. Angela Davis and friends.
Won't stop because we're upset. Won't stop because of our fear. We won't stop because we need a rest. We won't stop because of our tears. We won't stop until we confess all the blood that we spill around here. No, it won't stop until we repent of all the black bodies broken around here.
Join us again here at the center chair. We have two more conversants that are going to join us. I'm going to read their bios because I haven't had a chance to introduce them just yet. And of course, my thing just, okay, here it is. Ida Mariam Davis, born to an Ethiopian family in Baltimore. Davis has lived between multiple worlds. She is a descendant of anti-colonial fighters who kept Ethiopia free from colonialism when virtually all of Africa was carved out and divided among European powers. She was raised in Apple Valley, California, where her father was a member of the Mojave Desert Sierra Club and instilled a love of people and our planet. She left Apple Valley to attend UC Berkeley, and it was there in Oakland that her life of activism was sparked. In college, she worked for the Malcolm X grassroots organizing network, then worked for Congresswoman Barbara Lee, who invited her to join the Gathering of Elders, a meeting of civil rights leaders and young people to dialogue across generations, experiences, and communities to advance social, economic, and environmental justice. She currently is working as the Sierra Club's People, Culture, and Equity Officer. Am I saying that right? Yes, touch your neighbor, all right. And is a super amazing sister friend and comrade. Please welcome her to the stage as she comes to join this intergenerational conversation. Michael Tubbs is an American politician who is currently serving as a special advisor for economic mobility and opportunity for Governor Gavin Newsom. Tubbs raised over $20 million to create raised over $20 million. Hey, can I do my job? $20 million to create the Stockton Scholars, a universal scholarship mentorship program for Stockton students. He is the founder and chair of Mayors for a Guaranteed Income, along with EPIC. Clap your hands together for our friend and comrade, Michael Tubbs. And I'm going to invite Rosa Clemente and Dorsey Nunn, Rosa, come on back to the stage. Dorsey, why don't you come on back and y'all can have this conversation collectively. Then we'll bring everybody else back towards the end. Going to invite... Ada and Tubbs, you all are coming into the conversation, so feel free to go ahead and start it off, and y'all just flow for about 30 minutes.
Well, thank you for having us. This feels like a meeting of family. I have a lot of questions for you. Resistance is relational, it's not reform, and it is collective action. And so in Montgomery, there was a melee. Some people called it fade in the water. There were many names for what happened in terms of... No, we're not talking about bus boycott. We're talking about collective self-determination. And so I'm interested in your thoughts on sort of people coming together, responding to violence, resisting violence, and what that means, you know, for all of us. I think there's the respectability politics, right? There's how we should react, and then there's saving Black lives. So would love your thoughts.
Thanks, Ida. Can I say that you're my niece? Yes. I just asked her if I could say that she's my niece.
Yes. I'm very proud of that,
yes. Okay, Montgomery, yes. Yes. You know what I thought about when I learned about that amazing display of collective resistance?
Yes. Yes.
I thought about a time when I was living in LA, and it was right after the Black Panther Party office was attacked by the police. That was 1968. Was it 68? Mm-hmm. And we were demonstrating outside of the Black Panther Party office in an attempt to protect them from further assault by the police. And then suddenly, and there were elected officials with us too, by the way, suddenly they decided to attack. And somebody says, "Well, don't you know this is Mervyn Dimely? He's a legislator in Sacramento." And the cop looked at him and just hit him over the head with a baton. And we began to run. All of us, it was a large picket line. We had no idea what we were going to do because we were literally under violent attack by the cops. And then we ran down a side street, and suddenly doors began to open. People in the community, called us in, and within about 30 seconds, everyone who had been in that picket line was in a home, inside a home. And we don't know what might have happened had not that occurred. But that was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. And when I learned about Montgomery, I remembered that. And I remembered that these were not necessarily people whom we had organized. These were not necessarily people who called themselves a part of the movement. But it was an indication of what movements do and how movements bring vast numbers of people together. And not only those who are the most conscious ones and the most active ones, but they affect ordinary people. They create a different sense of the need to stand together with our comrades, with our sisters and brothers. So thanks for raising that. That's good. And we need to do that in, where are we now? San Francisco?
Yes.
Oakland.
Yes.
Especially in Oakland.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, in the spirit of Black August, I'm just really taking everything in. I think it's been incredible to hear your reflections as someone whose father's been incarcerated for the last 33 years, and thinking about how even in prisons, as you said, there's so much talent. So thank you, Google Live Free
but especially
creating the space. And I think for me, particularly as a former elected, have really been thinking about state violence in terms of structural violence or the avoidable impairment of basic human needs. And I say that because I think, given what we know about how crime and race are linked, for a lot of people, sort of prison abolition may be a bridge too far today. But I think we could get a lot of people sort of focused around this idea about violence being poverty, or violence being avoidable lack, or violence being the ways in which, as you said earlier, our institutions are organized that create these outcomes, as Latifah said earlier, that cause our babies to die prematurely or before the age of 50. So I would love to hear sort of your thoughts, your reflections around how do we begin to organize or to begin to have conversations around that as violence. And that is something we all can be movement leaders and revolutionary around.
How we shift the conversation away from violence perceived as what happens in our communities when someone gets shot by someone else who is a member of the community, how we shift it to urge an understanding of the structural character of state violence. I think what is really important, I'm going to bring, I mentioned patriarchy at one point, but I haven't used the F word, the feminism word, because I think that anti-racist, anti-capitalist feminism has taught us how to understand the connections, the intersectionalities, if you will, among various modes of violence. And I remember when a young woman who was in prison made the connection between intimate violence and state violence by saying that what I have experienced in these institutions, I have already experienced in relation to a violent partner. And it feels exactly the same. There's no difference in the way it feels. And, this is why I think, as has been pointed out, that reflection and study is so important. These insights don't come automatically. As a matter of fact, precisely because of the impact of ideology, we are shielded from those insights. We're led to believe that violence is something that is wielded by young Black man who hasn't had any opportunities and who learns that the way to demonstrate power is with a gun. Yeah, that's one mode of community violence, but if we think about it in conjunction with state violence, with institutional violence, that repeating myself, like I was trying to say to that reporter who was interviewing me when I was in jail, and you saw the clip earlier on at the beginning of the program. I was saying, why is it that people always assume that that is the most important manifestation of violence? Why can we not see that the institutions that constitute our society are the source of the worst kind of violence, and that racism is violence? So this is let me just say this is why we need study. This is why we need reflection. This is why Black August is important, because it emphasizes study and reflection and meditation and collective work. Does that make sense?
A lot of sense.
Okay.
My question is, in relationship to violence, I want to know, how do we change the narrative? Because I was a suspect long before I was a criminal. The acts of violence had been perpetrated probably most of my black ass life. Excuse me, Mike. So I want to know, how do we actually confront that right there for another generation of young people who will be attacked, probably not physically, but intellectually attacked, probably when they're in kindergarten. So I want to know what stops those acts of violence, because in part, government shaped me.
Dorsey. But I think you're absolutely right to think deeply about the interconnections, and violence doesn't happen because there are individuals who have violent proclivities. I mean, there may be individuals who have violent proclivities, but when you consider the fact that everything about the society we inhabit is violent, why don't we ask questions about the violence of the police? It's only been in this recent period that there has been a conversation, a public conversation about the violence of the police. And when, for me, because I'm a lot of years separate most of you from me, and I tend to think of something that happened in 2012 as just the other day, right? You know how that is. And I'm thinking about the fact that before the Dream Defenders, we did not have the kind of serious public conversation about the nature of violence. And this was Trayvon Martin. Were we willing to accept one more example of vigilante violence, which is related to racist police violence? The fact that we generally tended to conceptualize them as individual acts, and that we assume that the way to address it was also an individual process, an individual process of dealing with the particular vigilante, bringing the particular vigilante to justice, and only doing that. And I think what's so exciting about this period is, despite all of the problems, many people are aware of the fact that you can't just get rid of police violence by addressing the perpetrator of the violence. The violence is a part of the machinery of policing. And we cannot get rid of it until we change the way we think about public safety. Why do we think about police when we think about public safety? Why don't we think about housing? And why don't we think about education? And why don't we think about public health as connected to safety? That's a kind of complex conversation that needs to happen in order to address the particular kind of violence you were referring to, Dorsey.
Before I ask the question, I've been in Black studies all my life, since I was 19. Africana studies at SUNY Albany, and then under the greatest, one of the greats. He passed away a year ago, Dr. James Turner, who recruited me to Cornell to write my master's on the Young Lords Party and counterintelligence. And through that, I had found out that after J. Edgar Hoover said the Black Panther Party was the most threatening domestically, the second ones they talked about was the Puerto Rican Independista movement, right? And Puerto Rico was colonized 125 years, particularly because where it sits in the Caribbean. And when it's time to go to war, they were using Vieques, Puerto Rico. But we got that through a 20-year campaign. It went away. So the violence I'm seeing now is banning Black studies, banning advanced placement classes, banning, teaching that slavery was great. It's almost like didn't we deal with that? And in the 60s and the 70s, the work of people who had never been in a college but benefited from the work on the outside. And I really think we need to sit with that, and we see what they're doing. But as someone who I identify as a Black Puerto Rican. I'm not Black and Puerto Rican, I'm a Black Puerto Rican because there's Black people all over the world, right? And what I've been seeing, and this is the question, when we talk about anti-Blackness, in the last, I would say 4 years, you're beginning to see the explosion of Afro-Black, Latinx, like all of these terms that we didn't create. That the conversation has switched. We're not talking about white supremacy, but what I'm seeing, I wonder if you're seeing it, is that now it is, quote, Latinx folks that are being viewed and a narrative created that we're the anti-Black ones. And every time it always goes back to the Dominican Republic, right? Dominicans are anti-Black, Puerto Ricans are anti-Black. My thing is the whole world is anti-Black. So if you're a Dominican person or somewhere from Latin America and the Caribbean, well, let's just say, look at the border situation. If those have been white Argentinian people, if that's white migrants and immigrants, they wouldn't be locked down in cages and their children taken away. Have you seen that around, because you were so important to the young lords, especially the women of the lords? When you see this thing of anti-Blackness and the narrative being put mostly on a group of people right now, what do you suggest in how we fight that narrative and counter it?
Well, thanks for raising that question, Rosa, because I think it's very important. There's a way in which the term anti-Blackness is used that can be very divisive and that can often focus on other people of color as the perpetrators of anti-Blackness. What I would say is, for me, ever since I began to become political, Black was always a political concept. It was, if we had time, we could talk about the colonialism and the development of racism and colorism and all of that, and how it was used to as a divisive force. I like W.E.B. Du Bois's notion of Pan-Africanism, which Du Bois argued that it wasn't about biology. It wasn't about so much about racial inheritance. It was about anti-imperialism. And we forget that it's the its history. It's the history of colonialism, of slavery, that has shaped our very notions of race. And that, as a matter of fact, race isn't even a scientific concept. You know, race emerges out of a racist framework of racist and colonialist framework of trying to conquer the world. It's a capitalist, I mean, this is why we use the term racial capitalism, because it's a capitalist tool. And, you know, Du Bois argued so long ago that he didn't stand up for black people simply because they were black. It was about challenging imperialism, challenging colonialism. You know, why do we forget that lesson? Why do we assume that it's only important to be black? I mean, I can give you a long list of black folks that would be on that list of unmentionables. Of people, okay, there's a black person whose initials are TS. There's another one whose initials are TC. Oh, no, I got that wrong. I'm sorry, I have a little dyslexia. So CT. And so it's not so much about who you are. It's not about biological characteristics. It's about your willingness to be counted as a part of a global struggle to make the world more habitable for humans and non-human beings. This is why racism has been the prime method of dividing people and preventing the kind of political unity that might have pushed us much further than we are today. And not only in movements against racism, but the environmental movements to save the planet. Racism is largely responsible for the fact that we have not figured out how to save the planet Earth and how we are moving in a direction. I mean, all species will be extinct. We know that. The human species will eventually become extinct, but it doesn't have to happen tomorrow.
Right.
And it's the capitalists and the racists who are pushing us in that direction because of the legacies of racial capitalism.
Auntie A.
Was that just...
Absolutely. Thank you for my last chapter of my dissertation.
Ashe. Auntie A, I'm going to invoke our relationship, and I want to know about Papa Davis and Nana and what kind of political environment they created for the Davis sisters in particular, but the whole Davis clan, to raise strong women rather than repair broken women, men, to loosely use the Frederick Douglass quote. And I know some of those things, but I'm sure the audience would like to hear.
Oh, that's a long story. But I will say that I am really grateful to my parents for having created a family environment that led all of us to try to figure out what we can do to change the world. I've said this many times, but growing up in Birmingham, Alabama, my mother always told us that things are not the way they are supposed to be. Whenever we complained about not being able to go to the amusement park or not being able to do this, she would say that things are not organized the way they are supposed to be. And I think of that as my first lesson in critical theory. Because she urged us to imagine the world the way it should be. and to therefore learn how to inhabit this world of segregation, which we had no choice in that, but to inhabit a different world, a world that we would be responsible for building. And I think that that is what many people in prison are doing right now. And Dorsey can affirm the fact that the only way you can survive behind bars is in the imagination, is by living in the imagination, imagining a world that's free. And that's what my parents gave us. Thank you. Yep.
For a minute there, I thought that I'd be serving a whole life sentence in prison. You know, I mean, at 19, I was thinking that my lifespan would be 64 years old. And I was deducting 19 out of the 64 to figure out how much longer my sentence would be. I never imagined that I would be where I'm at. I never imagined going to South Africa with you. You know, one of the places I also went to was New Zealand. And when I was in New Zealand at Mount Eden Prison visiting people, what was sketched on the wall of a prison yard was the name of the gang, was the Black Power Gang. And their symbol is the symbol that I have on my hat right now. And I started asking questions that they didn't teach me in school, because they didn't teach me very much. And I sought out Asada in Cuba. And one of the questions that I asked Asada was, how come the international community wasn't holding the United States responsible for the practice of slavery as identified in the 13th Amendment and Article 1 in Section 6 in the California Constitution, because those 2 million people that are being held are not necessarily free from generating resources for a whole bunch of other folks. And it's one of those bodies of people that can still be sold on the open market through private prison contracts. So could you give me an answer about how internationally are we looking at the question of slavery as practiced by the government? Is there much difference between individual plantation owners and government plantation owners? So I'd like to know, how do we get international support to end slavery, at least here?
Okay, see, Dorsey always likes to pose these questions that would require us to cogitate for hours.
Okay, I'm sorry.
But first, I think it's important to say that there is a relationship between slavery and imprisonment. But I don't know whether we can equate the two. And the clause from the 13th Amendment that we always rely on only addresses one aspect of slavery, and that is the treatment of human bodies as property. That is the involuntary servitude. But there's so many other aspects of slavery that are missing there. And I mean, slavery spawned the racism that still infects our institutions. Slavery was responsible for the whole culture of treating Black people as less than human, which continues until this day. So I want to say that there are aspects of slavery that are still very much with us, not only behind bars, but in this room, in this institution, in our relationships, in our conversations with other people who inhabit the same society, and not necessarily only across race, because there are Black people who also support the racism that emanates from the system of slavery. But you want to know how to build an international movement.
Absolutely. I'm leaning forward.
And I want to emphasize that because I think that's the only way we can move forward these days. And because we live in the United States of America, we often think of ourselves as isolated. And we don't think about what's happening in Brazil and about the fact that if you want to learn about racist police violence, look at Brazil. That is far worse than anything that we can imagine in this country today. So I really want to affirm the fact that you're urging us to think with an internationalist lens. I think our movements, have to be internationalist, just as they have to be anti-racist, anti-capitalist, and they have to be opposed to patriarchy, heteropatriarchy. That is absolutely essential. And I suppose I would say that the one thing we should try to avoid is seeing issues myopically. Because that's how you end up with the kind of dilemmas that you were talking about, Rosa, in terms of anti-Blackness. If you only see through a very narrow lens, we have to be able to think of ourselves as humans, as human beings, as humans. And as a matter of fact, I think that probably people who have struggled for freedom are the best examples of what it means to be a human. The very notion of the human is already infected with racism because we try to imagine the human and we think white, right? So I'm just offering you some frameworks within which to think about, how we might go about building an internationalist movement that is designed to abolish imprisonment as the current mode of punishment, and to perhaps emphasize that we need to think about other ways of addressing those issues.
Hey, Angela, when I was on the yard at Mount Eden Prison, talking to a group of Maori, right? They said that they were Black, and they probably started having that particular notion develop as a result of the 1968 Olympics and everybody pumping their fists in the air. So there might be other Black people that are being recognized that I didn't even have I couldn't even imagine running into that embrace of people who look like Native Americans more so than African Americans. And so I just want to tell you.
But also, for a very long time in the UK, Black was used as a political term, bringing together people who were the victims of colonialism. So Black was a political term. It wasn't about the particular color of your skin. It was about struggle. It was about standing up and fighting back. And I think people all over the world have adopted that. In India, for example. Mm-hmm. So, let's not put too much currency on the way in which we in this country tend to use the term Black. We can learn from people in other national context in other parts of the world?
I'm encouraging.
Yes.
I'm encouraging people to travel internationally, because to the most part, I'm not seeing formally incarcerated people getting outside the United States enough to actually have informed opinions about the rest of the world. So I'm encouraging that.
Okay, I see Pastor Mike standing up.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm going to invite Phil and Latifah to come to the stage, but I just want to acknowledge, my staff just pointed out, someone even took black out of our title, Touch Your Neighbor, which is just a resistance to. So black is a bit of a threat to somebody, no matter how you describe it. Yes. Okay, just give me 1 second. So one of the things that I really want us to just spend our last few moments is just giving folks an opportunity. We've covered lots of territory today. Hasn't it been amazing? Hasn't it been wonderful? Yes. One of the things that we've really enjoyed since the beginning of these conversations is just being able to have us in the same space. And I'm going to invite all of y'all to have a few closing remarks or statements or takeaways. But generally, I would love for you all to give us a challenge of sorts. Something that folks can do to, in my tradition, there's a scripture that says, the person that hears the word of God and does not do the word of God is like a person who beholds their complexion in a mirror and forgets what they look like when they walk away. Which is to just say very plainly, faith without works is dead. And all of this that we've been curating is not particularly just for us to have a nice shiver up our spine, although that's great. But it is for us to become, in the spirit of Black August, more politicized, to actually do our part wherever we're situated. And so we have lots of folks situated very differently in the world of our communities, and would just love for folks to offer some closing remarks and then perhaps a challenge, appreciating that you see this clock counting down, and many of you all have been gifted with the intoxication of your own verbosity. So you don't gotta be short, but you just don't be long. Somebody say amen. All right. We'll start with I'm gonna start with Phil and Latifah, since they're just kind of coming in. And whatever, you may even have a question or a comment to Dr. Davis, but just we got about 10. We'll put that back on 10 minutes. We'll give you 10 minutes to just kind of wind it on down.
I'll just say that I'm grateful to be here. I'm always grateful to. As a child, I never would have imagined that an opportunity to at least to have my name listed above Dr. Angela Davis's, or below. Next time, alphabetical order. But it's just a great honor. It's a great honor, and I'm deeply appreciative of every moment that I've had to listen to you and to be guided by you and everybody up here. I'm just very, very grateful, immensely. I'll use my time wisely. Just to my call to action is to join an organization. There, as Dr. Davis said, there's no amount of charisma. There's no amount of magnitude and loquaciousness that can suffice for what an organization can do for social change and for our radical movements. And so no matter the bitterness or the disappointment or the shortcomings of your previous organizational experiences, it's never too late to join a new one, to start a new one, to support a new one. And organizations are the only thing that's going to get us to our desired goal. My personal organization that I'm representing is Black Men Build, And most folks have heard the name and been utterly confused as why you would call your organization that in this cultural milieu. And it's simply because sisters came to us and asked us in 2019 to intervene on what they saw was a rising tide of right-wing views being held by black men. And so my call to action is in particular to our brothers and people who identify as brothers in the room to join my organization. We have a chapter in Los Angeles, and we're hoping to start one here. The goal of the organization is to bring more black men into the movement, into the left, away from patriarchy, away from hateful rhetoric, away from black Wall Street talk all day, away from black podcasters, away from Umar Johnson, away from.
You said his name.
You said it. Oh, my bad. Dr. Umar Johnson and away from all manner of black charlatans who want to convince us that holding tighter to patriarchy, to holding tighter to black capitalism, to holding tighter to Eurocentric views is the way for us to get ahead and get forward. Our main thrust is our men's circle. It's a space for brothers to come together and talk about our interior worlds and to examine ourselves. And we will absolutely be honored if each and every one of you all would join our organization. Each of the sisters and other identified folks who has a brother who would benefit from the spaces that we're building to send them to us. Now, we are not 1-800-FIX a Negro, but we are committed and diligent with working on the mind, the body, and the soul. Our website is blackmen.build.
Yes. Let's go Lateefah first.
I want to do two things, and I'll keep it short. My hands are sweating, Dr. Davis, because what many of us as students of movement have also learned is to thank our teachers. And so we want to thank you, I think, collectively for your mercy. We want to thank you for your power. We want to thank you for your deep commitment, not only to sort of critical analysis, but reminding us every day the power and beauty of humanity. But moreover, for those of you who only understand Dr. Davis as someone who has come from the Black Panther Party, the last 40 plus years you have given to teaching babies, to teaching young people, to creating, not just spewing, but creating new pedagogy for us to understand our place on this earth. We thank you again for your power, for your mercy, for your brilliance, and your commitment to us. We just love you.
Yes.
We just love you. We just love you so much. And if any of us could just do just a piece of what you have done, a piece, a small fraction, we would have to do no more. So can you imagine the body of work and love and sacrifice and glory and style and grace and beauty? You remind us what is possible living a fierce life of intellectualism and revolution while never compromising a politic. And it just gives me chills to understand that we can be in space with you. That being said, there is a young man in this crowd. He is the grandson of Baba Shaka and Mama Ayana, who are the creators of Black August. Come on, we need to see your face. And why I say this, come on, baby. Why I say this, because there in California is a place for him that has been funded, and it is behind a prison wall. There are more spaces for this baby funded than spaces for him at the California State University, and that are funded under the University of California. I believe our call to action isn't just in the politic. It is in the movement that must keep going to make sure that this child, a deep descendant of freedom fighters, has a place not only at the table, not only at the dais, but at the center of the humanity of the young people that will come after him. Give him love.
Anyone, who's next?
And he's like, why did I get called up here? But you are a reminder of how precious and beautiful and the clarity of the black skin of the young people we saw painted in the depiction. Wiley was very clear in showing the beautiful bronze, the power of our DNA, the power of survival across many oceans, across the bottom of ships. We are in deep debt to you. We are so thankful for your life. We are so thankful to be able to fight alongside you, with you, and for you. Thank you, baby.
Not all at once. Go ahead.
No, yeah. I just want to encourage people to, 22 years ago, I was blessed to go to the UN conference against xenophobia, related intolerance, over 10,000 people from around the world. But I was part of Third World Within that Richie Perez founded before he passed away, and then there was the Durban 400. The day the United States left the dais of all political leaders, 2 hours before that was the United Nations finally passing that slavery is a crime against humanity and calling into question the Palestinian right of return. And I'll tell you, I left there like, this is it. We moving, the world is, and then September 11th happened. Because I landed in New York on September 11th. And when I got off that plane, we saw the tower get hit, everyone on the plane. If you look at images, there was not one cloud in the sky that day. They told us, we don't know what's going on. If you're an American citizen, your passport, and go. And as my dad is picking me up, the chaos is happening. We then see the plane hit the other tower. I got home that night and I cried to my mom and dad. I said, they are gonna stop everything we just accomplished. So I encourage people to learn about that. Read books, not Google, Wikipedia, actual books. Read books, read theory, methodology. Join an organization, support one, and support someone on the inside. For me, the new organization I started is called the Black Latinx Media Collective, because as a Black Puerto Rican and seeing also younger people using terms like Blaxican, we need a media collective that will speak to. I encourage anybody here, especially young people, if you say you're Mexicano, Ecuadorian, Latino, Latinx, Hispanic, and all of that, don't worry. It takes a minute when we start bringing this stuff home to our families, right? We got to sit with them and break it down. But that's what we have to do. So you can go to my website, rosaclemente.net, and see the work around that, and that we have to kill the narrative in our community that we're everything but Black, that we're everything but African descendant people.
Thank you, thank you.
I will keep it Black and keep it brief. To your point, Black people, we were African before we were anything else. To be a child separated from their mother does not make them any less a child. As an Ethiopian and a Black woman, it has been critical to me to understand what Auntie A, Dr. A, all the names has shared, which is we have an emancipatory vision that is our gift, our inheritance, our birthright. We can see the world as it should be. And my call to action, or my sort of thought for you all, is how are you imagining a world that isn't here, and what are you doing to get toward that? Every day. How do we decenter whiteness every day, like you saw in that exhibit? Whether it's the black walls, it can be small things, but what are the everyday things you can do to decenter white, heteronormative, dominant culture?
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I'll be really brief. Really two things. I think on reflecting on Black August, and I think the fact that we have a pastor here convening us, I was reminded of the words of Isaiah 61. So I'm just going to read a little bit of it, because I think it really kind of illustrates what we've been talking about, but also the exhibit. It says, the Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn and provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow upon them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of despair. They will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of his splendor. They will rebuild the ancient ruins and restore the places long devastated. They will renew the ruined cities that have been devastated for generations. Strangers will shepherd your flocks. Foreigners will work fields and vineyards. And you will be called priests of the Lord, and you will be named ministers of our God. You will feed on the wealth of nations, and in their richness you will boast. Instead of your shame, you will receive a double portion, and instead of disgrace, you will rejoice in your inheritance. And you will inherit a double portion in your land, and everlasting joy will be yours. And last verse, for I, the Lord, love justice. I hate robbery and wrongdoing. In my faithfulness, I will reward my people and make an everlasting covenant with them. Their descendants will be known among the nations, and their offspring among the peoples. All who see them will acknowledge that they are the people that the Lord has blessed. And then my challenge will be, and you talked about this, Phil, sitting with elders. 10 years ago, I went on the freedom rides with some of the original freedom riders, and we spent 10 days going to every stop where they stopped. And as we approached Anniston, Alabama, his name was Bob Singleton, he looked at me and he said, Michael, I was arrested on August 4th, 1961. Why is that day important? And I said, well, sir, you were arrested. If you weren't arrested, I wouldn't be on this bus, all these freedoms. Cause sometimes people fish for compliments. So I thought that's what was happening. And then he looked at me and he said, no, on that day, Barack Obama was born. And then he said he had no idea that the choice he made on that day would pave the way for a baby born in Black August 1961 to someday have the chance to be president. And then he looked at me and he said, what are you prepared to do today so that 50 years from now a child grows up in a world different than the world you grew up in? And I think that question is sort of what Dr. Davis has painstakingly been asking us for the past 2.5 hours, what all the other panelists have said. And I think it's really the question of both Isaiah 61, but also of Black August. It's really about not anything prescriptive, but one that's internal and reflective. And it's really, what are we prepared to do today so that 50 years from now, a Black August celebration isn't one talking just about violence and just about despair and just about what's broken, but also talks about how we've overcome. How 50 years ago it looked like this, but today it looks different. And the only way we get to that answer is to answer that question, and then as I just said, to do something. So again, my challenge is, what are we prepared to do today, which is the easy day, because we're going to be all fired up and inspired on Twitter. But tomorrow, next week, when it's time to support our sister at the ballot box, the year after that, what are we prepared to do today so that 50 years from now, our children, our future elder, aren't having the same conversations, but one that's about how we overcame.
Yes, thank you. For the record, that Isaiah 61 passage causes us to levitate on a Sunday morning. Yes. Just want you to know. Dorsey, any final remarks? Then Dr. Davis, you'll close us out.
I won't choose the live one. I would ask you to call, most of the people in here is probably from California. I'd ask you to call your senator and your assemblyman. I would ask you to encourage them to actually pass Assembly Constitutional Amendment 8, which prohibits the practice of involuntary servitude in the Constitution and in California prisons. Now, there's a particular reason that I want to do it, is it to be the first time that people in California will have the choice to vote on the issue of slavery. The second reason I want it to happen is because if you actually put something on the ballot, other people will come to vote for you. Because if we don't have anything on the ballot of substance, we can't drive the population to go vote. So, like, how do we get people to actually engage in democracy if there's nothing substantive that can vote for and that can make changes in their life? So, I encourage you, I implore you to actually call your Senate, your senator, and your assemblyman and actually say, encourage them to vote yes when they get a chance, because you want the opportunity to vote on the issue of slavery in the state of California. And some other people can get a chance to actually hold office.
Thank you. Final words for us as we prepare to.
I don't know about. Is this working?
It's on. Yes.
I don't know about final words, but what I will say is that there is something that every single one of us in this room today can do. In the spirit of Black August, we can reflect. We can think about the consequences of our actions. And since we've been focusing on carceral institutions, I would like to ask all of you to try to imagine what it might be like to live in a world where these institutions don't exist. And in the course of your everyday lives, whenever you encounter a situation that would ordinarily require us to affirm these institutions, think about an alternative. Think about what else is possible. So that when you find yourself in a situation where you need help and your impulse is to call the police, think about another way of addressing that situation. One of my neighbors years ago said, if something ever happens to you and you need to call the police, don't call the police. Call the fire department, because they will be here and they will protect you. But I'm just urging you to think about creative ways of imagining what it might be like to live in a different world, and to bring that sense into this world so that ultimately we might have a world that no longer needs to rely on such violent institutions, but rather we have a world in which we can have true safety and security and love and happiness for all.
Thank you. Come on, everyone, let's appreciate our guests, our conversants. We are so grateful that you've made it out tonight or today. Our next conversation will be September 16th, I believe, and we will talk about reparations. So look out for that. Thank you all for coming out. Have a wonderful, wonderful afternoon. Thank you again.
Love you too.
Let's get this group photo really quick. 1 second.